Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
Welcome, everyone, to the P.A.S. Report podcast. This is your host, Nick Giordano. I am glad you could join me. Make sure that you follow and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. Also, visit the P.A.S. Report website, pasreport.com, and share this episode with your family and friends. Make sure people know what's going on. We got less than a week until Election Day. Things are nuts out there, and you have to get out to vote to make change. And I can think of no better candidate to come on the program than Addul Ali, who's the congressional candidate for North Carolina's District 12, co-host of the Urban Conservative and Top of the Morning. Ali, I've known you for a long time. Running for Congress is not a small decision. What were you thinking?
That remains to be seen. But I'll tell you what really happened, Doc, was that as a county chairman, part of our job was to recruit candidates. And I recruited a candidate that ran for the state legislature. He was successful, became the freshman leader, started the small business caucus, really good friend of mine. Shouts out to Kevin Crutchfield. And what ended up happening when I moved back to Charlotte, he goes, who's running against Alma Adams? And the way he said it wasn't like a question. It was more like, you do realize, but after he made that call to me, I called some of my Democrat friends. I called some of my Republican friends. I had a talk with leadership. Obviously a talk with my family. And when I looked at the type of representation that the 12th Congressional District has had, and someone that has been essentially a partisan hack, someone that's not really voted in the best interest of the people, but what's in the best interest of a party, I decided, why not give it a shot?
Well, I mean, I think it's so important that people do get involved like yourself, because you do make waves. Now, when we look at the last couple of elections in District 12, she's won by about 25, 30 points in some races, but your candidacy is sparking waves. Your candidacy is actually changing the dynamics of this district. You have this as an overwhelming district, yet the Democrats, and so many are so pathetic, have resorted to stealing your signs that you're a threat. So obviously your message is resonating with voters. And how do you plan to close the gap against in this district?
Well, look, it really boils down to one thing, and that is meeting as many voters and meeting the voters where they are. The biggest thing for this district is obviously it's Charlotte. It's a highly blue district. But from what we've seen, our internal polling and surveys that we've put out there, folks want change. They want somebody that's going to go to D.C. and represent the best interest of the 12th Congressional District. Not only are we running the digital, the social ads and all of that, but we've spent every single waking moment out in the community, talking to voters, meeting them where they are. We do bar hops on weekends. We've been out at the polls every day. We've met with business leaders, faith-based leaders, and we're just going to continue to talk to the folks, find out what the people want, and make sure that we're doing the best by them. The other side to this, and look, it's not just my campaign. We're seeing this across North Carolina. The Moore County Democrat Party chairman was actually arrested and charged for stealing campaign signs here. The problem that we have is that one side is extreme. One side is win at all costs, no morals, no scruples, if you will. And we're just trying to play by the rules. So for every sign of mine they've taken down, we've put up 3 more.
Yeah. And for the ones that, want to sit there and take signs and try and marginalize candidates and silence them, they're the ones that accuse Republicans of being fascists. It truly is amazing. But you said something important. First of all, I have to ask, how many pairs of shoes have you gone through? I always ask people running for campaigns, because I find it amazing how much on the ground, hitting the pavement it takes to actually win campaigns. And you said something that really is important, that differentiates yourself from the old established order of the GOP. Bar hops. You go where voters are. It used to be that Republican candidates, they would show up to all civic meetings, and they would show up and give speeches in front of businesses and everything. When it comes to bar hops, how does that change the dynamics?
So what the coolest part about this is people, you walk up, hi, my name is Addul. I'm your candidate for U.S. House District 12. is this your favorite spot? Is this where you come? What do you do? People are 9 out of 10 times more receptive to having a 2 minute conversation. The wow factor of a congressional candidate sitting there having a Guinness with them. I can't understate how important that is. But the other side to that is we're talking about an electorate that, especially here in Charlotte with the younger dynamics, they're not really comfortable with you coming to their door. They don't necessarily want to be bothered while they're at home. Now, there is something to be said about the Trump campaign strategy of knocking on low propensity voters' doors. And obviously in North Carolina, it's working as Republicans are ahead in early voting in both by mail and in-person early voting. And we haven't churned through our election day, voter. So I think there's something to be said, not only about what we're doing, which is meeting voters where they are, but something about going to talk to those low propensity voters. So I don't want to shut out the traditional door knock completely, but I think you're right. One of the things that I noticed, and I've heard this from people across the country, is that when they go to Republican events in their town or their county, it's a variation of the same 50 or 60 people. So you might have, this 50 at that women's group, a slightly different 50 at that men's group, a slightly different 50 at that group. And I think to change that, it's a matter of going out, being present, because people aren't going to be attracted to us. We're going to have to go get them. It's kind of like the Christian principle, go ye therefore, it doesn't say wait for them to come. It says go. So that's what we've got to do. And that's what we've been doing with this campaign.
Yeah, and it's so smart because I see the failures over here in my area where you have the local GOPs that will hold the meeting and they have the same person speaking. It's usually the town chairperson, and there's like 10 people that show up to the meeting. Whereas if you're out there in public, people get to understand. And when you're talking in a comfortable environment like a bar, you could actually engage with not just Republicans, but Democrats and independents as well. Not, the far left loons, you're never going to change their mind. We all know that. But I don't think people realize how many independents and non-affiliated voters there are that if someone speaks to them, maybe they'll open their eyes. Are you seeing that level of interest, not from Republicans, but just from ordinary folks, ordinary independents, people that may not have been affiliated or involved in politics all that much?
Well, yeah, and one has to remember that in North Carolina, unaffiliated is the biggest political party. So, what we've done is we've tended, we want to drive out our base, sure, but it's really about the unaffiliated and the what I call the classic old school JFK Democrat that is a pro Second Amendment, strong borders, low crime type of Democrat, and saying, hey, I will represent those same values. I'm not going to try to convince you to become a Republican. You do what you do, but I share your values and principles. I'll share this with you. I did a radio interview here on our local NPR station, and the host of the show couldn't believe that I was a Republican. He's like, "Oh my God, are you sure you're a Republican?" I'm like, "Why?" Because I don't want the government in hospital rooms and bedrooms, because I will go and meet to the LGBT chamber and participate in their events and meet those voters where they are, because I will go sit down with anybody and have a cordial, civil discussion and say, hey, we may not agree about everything, but the one thing that we can agree on is that we all want to be safe. We all want an effective and efficient government. We all want to feel like our children are getting the best possible education. We want to feel like the government is spending our dollars as wisely as they can. We can work on the things we agree on, and we don't have to demonize each other over the things we don't.
Yeah,
Last thing I'll say about,
it's
yeah,
not that hard.
no, and the last thing I'll say about this is the reception we've gotten from unaffiliated voters by and large, and even from some Democrats, is, hey, it's about time somebody from the working class represents this district in Congress. Because, and this is, I have not made this personal, but the fact of the matter is my opponent's been in Congress for 10 years, spent 20 years in the legislature before that, years on the school board before. We're talking about a career entrenched in the system politician, not someone that's had to go out there and sign the front end or the back of a paycheck for 35, 40 years. So, people want something different, and I think that's what we're giving them.
Yeah, and I think that, when you're in the system for that long and when you're part of the Democrat establishment, you begin to get this sense of entitlement. Like, people have to vote for you and they should vote for you just because of who they are and they're a Democrat and they're in that position. But we're seeing an interesting trend, especially amongst young Black men, where they are gravitating towards the Republican Party in large numbers. I mean, the last poll I looked at, Trump was over 20%, when it comes to black men and black support. That is more than Nixon received. Nixon got the highest amount of black votes than any Republican, and it looks like Trump may surpass that. Why do you believe this shift is happening? What has woken up an enormous amount of people within the black community to say enough is enough? And what opportunities does it bring to your campaign?
Well, I think part of the thing is, and I said this on an interview yesterday, the fact of the matter is the black male voter is just like every other voter. We're husbands, we're fathers, we're sister, we're brothers, we're uncles, we're business owners, we're workers, we're people that have the economy affects us just like it affects everybody else. One of my good friends is a single dad with 9 or 10 kids he has,
Oh my
and
God.
he's
Oh
like,
boy.
look, you know what his number one issue is, Doc?
What?
Laundry detergent. It's laundry detergent. He's like, bro, it was $6 before. It's $15 now. And I've got to buy a bunch of laundry detergent. So when you talk about the black male voter, you're talking about somebody that's seeing things like their daughters getting beat up in sports by biological men. They're seeing the crime in their communities out of control. They're seeing illegal aliens come to this country and get the red carpet laid out for them. They're seeing that Barack Obama, who did absolutely nothing to improve the conditions of black communities, is coming out here finger waving and lecturing. They're seeing somebody, and I thought it was ingenious that Trump called out Kamala Harris's air finger quote blackness, because we wouldn't have been able to have the conversation in the black community otherwise. And far more people have said what I've said, which is going to Howard don't make you black. We damn sure don't cook no greens in no bathtub. Showing up to a black church after you tell Christians that they're at the wrong rally is not what we're about. So I think you're seeing this. And the other side on the Trump end of this, to give him some credit, Trump has never changed up. He's never we know who he is. He's gonna say some real arrogant sometimes, rough around the edges, but he's gonna call it how he sees it. And I think black men like me and so many others respect that. And I think we're voting on policy. We're not voting pigment this time around.
Yeah, and I think everyone should respect that. I mean, listen, there's times where Trump will say things and I'll cringe. I'm like, oh, why did you go down that road? But at the same time, you look at Kamala Harris, and she is the most inauthentic candidate that I have ever witnessed in my lifetime run for president. I mean, Hillary would pander to certain groups, and Hillary was certainly dubious, but she was at least smart. You got Kamala Harris that is inauthentic, and she doesn't have a single original thought herself. And then it's kind of insulting because the message coming from Democrats and the far left is the economy is great. The economy is wonderful. The economy is on fire. Do you see that disconnect between the Democrats and people's actual reality?
So I'll put it this way. There was an event the other day in Charlotte called Black Men for Kamala Harris, and about 3 people showed up, bro. This is look,
That's hysterical.
this is the problem that the Democrats have, right? And I'm going to be very as delicate as I can with this. Most people don't own stock. Most people aren't playing in the stock market. So the stock market booming has nothing to do with the fact that, and I'm going to use me. About 3 weeks ago, my daughter said, "Hey, Dad, I want to make taco salad. Go get some Doritos." I went to go buy a bag of Doritos, and when the thing was $5, I almost lost my mind in the supermarket. Like people were looking at me because I couldn't fathom a bag of Doritos that big being $5. And you know, like I know, it's mostly air. It's not mostly Dorito in this bag.
Yeah.
So I think the disconnect is that the Democrats are campaigning to corporate Democrats. They're campaigning as if there's still a Dick Cheney Republican or a Liz Cheney Republican. That voter doesn't exist. There's people are hurting across the board. And I think that when you're talking about people like Kamala Harris, who will show up in an $800 belt, $15,000 earrings to go pass out food to people. It's like, come on. So I think that the Democrats are so disconnected. And if Trump, not if, but when Trump wins, the Democrat Party is going to have to hit a major reset. The common sense JFK blue dog, yellow dog Democrat is going to have to take back control of their party if they want to survive another 20 years in American politics as a major party, in my opinion.
Why do you think the Democrats have moved so far to the left? I mean, I always found it interesting. It's like you have the party switches, and yeah, parties adjust their platforms every now and then. But when you look at Democrats, it seems that they become the ones that want to empower the bureaucracy. They want to grow the military-industrial complex. They want to take away freedom of speech. When liberals were champions of freedom of speech, you know, they were suspicious of government. They called out government for its abuses. Now you have an entire party apparatus that wants the government to do more against their political opponents, that they want the FBI to investigate their political opponents and anyone that supports their political opponents. I'm a traditional Catholic. You know, you had the FBI label traditional Catholics as potential domestic violent extremists. Now they've since pulled back that report, but the
Sure.
fact that it was issued in the first place is so revealing. Like, what is going on in the United States today?
So I think there's a few things that have happened. One, the amount of money, and this doesn't know aside, the amount of money at play in American politics is a major part of the problem. When you have lobbyists and special interest groups that have the power to determine what legislation is going to make it, they have the power to buy the TV ads. I think we live in what I'll call an uninformed consent society, you know, where people by and large, for the last 20 years, have had their opinions shaped by the talking heads on the media. And then when we look at the George Soroses of the world, when we look at how people are able to use their money to influence the process, and that's where Democrats have gotten, by and large, where they are today, is because they've controlled the processes. When you control the DA's office, when you control the Attorney General's office, you're able to do things for the process that allow you to remain in power. One of the things that I pride myself on that my opponent hasn't done is I've not taken any PAC money. I've taken no money from the National Republican Party. I've taken no money from the state Republican Party. The vast, I think 98% of my donations are small dollar donations from everyday people that want to see a change, both Democrat, unaffiliated, and Republican. And I think we've got to get this idea of somebody being able to be in Congress for 20, 30, 40 years out the window. Now, some make the argument you should be able to stay as long as the people vote for you. And I get that. But the way technology advances, the way the world is changing so quickly, I think after about 6, 8 years in Congress, you've pretty much used up all the fresh ideas, new ideas that you have. So I'm in favor. I've signed the term limits pledge, Doc. But I think that is the problem in our country, is that there's too much money, too much special interest involved in politics. I think people now are starting to see past the facade of bussing in the supporters, because 10 years ago, we would have never knew that Kamala Harris was bussing in supporters. We would have just had to take it hook, line, and sinker. Look at all those supports. Now we have geofencing and geo-tracking. We could tell these cell phones came from Georgia and got bussed off. So I think the special interest has got to get out of politics. We've got to, at somehow, some way, whether it's constitutional amendment or something, get some term limits in place. Equal opportunity basher, like Mitch McConnell, these people that have been there since I was 8. It's too much. So I think we've got to look at that. But that's, I think, essentially the problem: the money and the length of time that people are allowed to amass power and influence in DC.
And I think that's so important. I do support term limits. I mean, the reality is our founding fathers wanted a citizen legislature, not a professional legislature. And I believe that a lot of these politicians become institutionalized once they're in the system for so long. So you look at it and you get into Congress, you're going to fight against the idea of people staying there for decades, fight against special interest groups. What about bureaucratic overreach? If elected, would you prioritize reining in what people like me see as an overreaching bureaucracy that has abused its power tremendously over the last 10 years with censorship and targeting Americans? How would you approach this issue?
So I think the first thing that we've got to look at is how we are allowing dollars to flow into politics. And I am a big fan of anything that's going to come up that'll reduce the amount of influence from special interest groups and lobbyists. I think and I don't care which side of the Israel-Palestine issue you're on, there's certain groups that have way too much influence in American politics. Any bill that comes up that says, hey, we're going to streamline the election process, we are going to take dollars out of the equation. I am not a fan of public financing for elections. I don't think we need to be doing that. If you can't raise the money, you can't raise the money. Like, what do you do? And I think, look, I've had a chance to listen to some of the weaponization of government House committee hearings, and it's terrifying that big tech, these social media companies, can do what they've done. And I give Elon Musk a lot of credit for what he did with X, in that it's an open platform. Now, I think that when you see the government wanting to have, what do they call it, the misinformation, bureau and all of that, that's dystopian. And to me, I think we need to be wary. Anytime you want to expand the government, create something new, add a new office of this or that, you're increasing that bureaucracy. The other thing is, and one of the things I've proposed in my campaign, is to streamline the federal Department of Education. I know President Trump and Elon Musk have talked about this, but we're talking about an organization that has a $235 billion budget, 14 sub-agencies under the Department of Education.
And
I
it's
can think of
completely useless.
all useless. And the question I've always asked, Doc, is, have we seen a return on the investment of those billions of dollars in the forms of improved outcomes for our children? And the answer is no. So in my world, I agree with what President Trump and Elon Musk said. Let's look for opportunities to streamline the federal government, reduce the bureaucracy, get it out of the way. I'd rather reduce the size of the bureaucracy at the Federal Department of Education, give teachers a federal subsidy for pay, increase, and I'm proposing something here. I get to plug something. I'm proposing something called the MATE Act, MAITT, which stands for More Americans in Trades and Technology. The first thing we do, streamline the Department of Education, identify all the fraud and waste we can in that department and in the government at large. You, at a middle school level, identify kids that want to go into trades or technologies. You make those programs free. You subsidize the community colleges. You make those programs free. We get as many plumbers, pipe fitters, electricians, and people in technology as we possibly can. The other thing the MATE Act would do over a 10-year period is reduce the amount of non-citizen federal contractors in our critical IT infrastructure. So what that means is organizations like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac that have a massive IT departments, we don't need non-citizens running our IT departments with our critical technology infrastructure. So it's things like that, it's solutions like that. There's plenty of Americans that can do those jobs. We've just got to train them up, get them up to speed, and reduce our reliance on foreign non-citizens in our critical infrastructure. But it's things like that that I think will help reduce that bureaucracy. And, we have solid ideas around how to do that.
Yeah, that's good. And I think it's really important. I mean, when you see that the left, all they do is operate in fear, Trump's going to be Hitler and fascist. And if we don't have illegal immigrants here, nobody's going to be picking the produce for us, and our grocery stores are going to be empty. It's like all they do is operate on fear. So what is the key message you want voters to remember in their heads as they go to the polls?
Well, the first thing I want people to do is remember that you have to vote. Nothing's going to change if you sit at home and you don't get out there and vote. That is just number one.
And then all you do is complain. It's the most frustrating thing when people complain, and yet they don't volunteer. They don't go to the candidates and say, I want to help you out with my time. They don't go to the polls and vote. It's so frustrating listening to them complain.
Yeah. So you know what they say, it's the one in the arena, not the critic, that counts. So the way you get in the arena is by first and foremost voting. But here's the second thing. For folks that are going to see this, that live in my state, that may live in Charlotte, North Carolina, think about this for a second. We're talking about someone who voted against the Lower Energy Cost Act that would to help reduce the cost of energy. We're talking about someone that voted against the Protecting Women from Domestic Violence Act. Think how simple this bill is. It was a 3-page bill that basically said, if you are an illegal immigrant and you get charged with, SA, we'll call it sexual assault, rape, neglect, abuse, stalking, you are immediately deportable and non-admissible to the United States. She voted against that. She fought against having the parents informed if their child wants to change their gender at school. This isn't partisan stuff. This is common sense. everyday American, whether you're Democrat, left, right, LGBT, it doesn't matter. Common sense leadership and representation is what we need. So my message to the voters is just like the Charlotte Observer said, I am a considerate conservative. If you're a moderate, everyday working class person, I'm the right person for you. And I hope to earn your vote. It's aliforcongress.com is the website. You can, I'm easily accessible. I'm invested in my district. I live here. I work here. My kids have gone to school here. And I'm going to do what's best for the people in the district, not for the party.
And we're going to have links up at the P.A.S. report where you could go and you could support the campaign. So I encourage everyone, do what you can. And even if you're not from North Carolina, you could still support the campaign. So keep that in mind. Always a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me, Doc. Appreciate you.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at PASreport.com and follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at PAS Report.